Okay, good evening, everybody. Again, I know some of y'all may not know my face just because I've only been here 3 years and we sit over here and y'all sit back there and probably haven't necessarily talked to you yet, and I apologize. But anyways, my name's Tom Fry, and I'm going to be talking to y'all tonight about the disaster relief ministry that we're trying to start here at Choctaw. And we have a couple of guests here. One is my sister, and I don't want to steal her thunder, but she's going to talk to you about a couple different perspectives. One, as being a victim. I think she's been hit like 5 times, isn't that right? So, stay away from her and her house. So, luckily she moved to Mustang, we moved out here, so we're way far apart. So, but we actually used to live like a mile and a half away from each other. So, and then we have Joe Crawford from Memorial Road Church of Christ, and he heads up the ministry there, and his lovely daughters, and he's going to talk from the perspective of a ministry. So we're trying to mirror the programs at other successful churches that have been doing these programs for a very long time. So, they've been a lot of help to me so far, and like I said, I've done work with Memorial Road and Central Church of Christ. So. But as far as the volunteer part of it, well, first we're going to talk about what's it going to look like, and honestly, I don't know. Because every disaster is going to be different, and how we respond to those is going to be different, and to say exactly what it's going to look like, right now we're just trying to nail Jello to the wall, because we don't know. And so, but with the volunteer part of it, again, everybody is a volunteer. You're not going to be able to be here, because I've had people say, well, my job requires this, or, not everybody's going to be here for every disaster. And I may not be here. So again, I need people that can step up, come in, into my position and take over, because what if it's my house that gets hit? I may not be able to be here. So anyways, again, everything's going to change. The needs of the community are going to change. The needs of our church are going to change. And the one thing I will say is it will change our church. It will change how we, not from the ministry side of it, but it's in our beliefs, but it's going to change how we get along, how we know each other. We're going to become a lot tighter probably after this. And has anybody in here been through a disaster? So a couple of y'all have been through some major disasters, and it changes you. It changes your perspective on life. It changes your perspective on family, everything. So luckily, I was spared every time, not by much, but I was spared every time. My history of involvement, like I said, I've worked with, in 2011, through the Moore tornado, I worked with Memorial Road and Central. I used to be a member at Central, and so working with Memorial Road, and at that point, I was going to Oakdale Church of Christ, which was a plant off of Memorial Road, if anybody knows where that is. And we heard about the ministry that was happening at Memorial Road, and I don't know, there was probably 20 to 50 of us that showed up just from our church. And I was helping them lead crews into Moore, and I will tell you the difficult thing was just getting the crews in, because you've got police and National Guard posted, and they're turning you away. So again, each disaster and how we respond is going to be different, because when we showed up thinking we're going to go into Moore, we get there and we can't get through the roadblocks. And so we had vans full of people. We moved over into Newcastle area, and we started chainsawing. And we chainsawed from one end of the street to the other end of the street, and we worked all day long. And we were removing limbs and trees that had fallen on fences, and some of it was pretty dangerous. And so the next time we go out, I'm in communication with Joe because, again, we're hitting the roadblocks, but I just happen to know some back roads because I grew up in Moore, I lived in Moore all my life, so I knew some back roads into some areas, and so we led those crews in that way. Then after that, I transitioned over to working straight at Central, And my entire family was involved, and partly because Connie and her family were at Central, and but my family was involved in the process of, you show up, you don't know what you're going to do. You don't know what the need is of the day. You don't know what crew you're going to be on, but we ended up, that first day, we ended up doing food. And so we had somebody with, I think it was a food truck, and I don't know how many grills and cookers and smokers were on these trucks, but we were processing probably, I don't know, a couple thousand breakfasts every morning. And I was on the packaging side of it. So I had probably the outside of cooking, standing there in the heat cooking, I had probably one of the worst jobs of just packaging. Now, we all want to get out there, get into the community. We want to see it. We want to be involved. We want to be there helping somebody. But the meals, just the person packaging those meals is extremely important. So every job that happens is crucial to the whole process. Deanne, we ended up not driving my pickup that day, which was a mistake. We ended up taking my wife's Prius. And a Prius going into the disaster area isn't exactly the most optimal vehicle, but you don't know what you're going to encounter from a vehicle standpoint of nails, debris, that kind of stuff, and tires. And so her and my daughter, which most of y'all know my daughter, they hand-delivered meals all day long. That's all they did. As soon as they would arrive back at the church, we had Walmart bags full of meals, and we sent them right back out. And that's all they did all day long. But it was kind of cool because my niece and my daughter, I think, got pictures with Joe Jonas because he was there. So kind of a side note. But and some of y'all may not know who Joe Jonas is, but the girls certainly did. So every time we respond, and we've already had some, just since we announced this at the church, we had a couple of occasions where we were able to offer assistance. One was to one of our elderly members, and they declined, said that they were fine, and they said that insurance had them all taken care of, and they had family coming in to cut down trees because they wanted the firewood. So that was great. We didn't have to respond to that one. The second time was we had a firefighter here in Choctaw, and I think some of y'all actually, I found out later that some of y'all actually know the family, but their house just burnt down a couple weeks ago, and so we were able to, the church bought them water, and we took that over there to them. So that was the only request that they had at the time. I was on the phone with them several times trying to instruct them on some things they could do for insurance purposes. So, but again, we're going to make mistakes. I know Joe could say that they've probably made a lot of mistakes, and I know Central probably made a lot of mistakes, and they learned from it. And those mistakes provide opportunities for us to grow as a congregation, grow as a ministry, and we're going to learn. So again, it's like I said, it's a learning process all the way through. Our vision for this is, number one, obviously, our church, the Choctaw community, Eastern Oklahoma County, so Harrah, Newalla, Midwest City, and then be able to provide assistance for the Oklahoma City metro area. I don't know if we'll ever grow beyond that. I know Memorial Road, y'all do stuff out of state. I think you said that y'all had gone to Houston and several other areas. So, I don't know if we'll ever get that big. I don't know if that's, possible for us, but we'll certainly do what we can when we can. And I know that this congregation, I think, has been a recipient of some help at least once or twice. I think Kentucky Church of Christ sent generators during an ice storm. Isn't that correct? Out of Tennessee, okay. So I know this congregation has been a recipient of some of that. So now it's our opportunity to do the same for other people. The how, first of all, after talking with the elders and everything, we're going to operate from a very minimal budget. And those operational, the operational budget's going to go to things like covering advertising, banners, paperwork, because there's going to be a ton of paperwork involved. So lots of copying, because we need to log every single thing that we do, every family that we help, every time we send crews out, what we do for them, because it's important not only as a congregation to know what we're doing, but to show other congregations what we're doing so that we can get help from them. And what if, we lend help to somebody and they say, well, your people did this. They destroyed this. They did more damage to my house. And so we need to be able to log what we've done, who we've done it for, and that also gives our elders an opportunity to follow up with them later. And I'll show you how we're going to do that. But they can follow up with those people, and it might be an opportunity for them to become members of our church. So, but most importantly, this is a way for us to show our love for Christ and show in our works what we do. So, beyond this budget, and we'll probably do it just like y'all do it, where you do a special offering when there is a disaster. We'll do a special offering, and I think during this last flood, you said there was 13,000 donated by your own church, and then you picked up another 15,000 from Texas somewhere. So they had a $25,000 budget that they were working with to get back out to the community. And that's, number one, the budget within the church is for us to operate. The donations and everything, we want to make sure that all that money gets back to the community. That's not for us. Nobody's getting paid or anything like that. So I've talked to Hal. Hal's going to help us build a website so that we can, again, communicate to the public what we're here for, how we're going to help them, and then provide opportunities for other churches and people in the community to make donations to us. So, also, I've been working with Mr. Kearns at Oklahoma Emergency Management, and they are willing to provide us free training in areas such as Oklahoma Emergency Management training, FEMA training. They're also providing us a direct phone link with FEMA, so we'll have, when a disaster strikes, we'll act as a command center here, and we'll have FEMA contact and help from them, help from Red Cross, everybody. So, and this is extremely important, just from a communication network, but also from a being able to provide the right assistance to the people that need it. There's going to be a sign-up sheet, and I guess y'all can go ahead and start that around. Yeah, I'm going to talk about that. But there's going to be a sign-up sheet that's going to go around here in just a second. And so, again, one thing I want to stress as you're signing up is just because you sign up for one area doesn't mean you might not get pulled for something else. Obviously, again, how we operate and how we send crews out will in part be determined by our ability. So some of us have abilities that or limitations that may require you to be here at the church and can act in the command center and the donation side of it, where other people can actually go out and be on the crews. But we're going to have different areas that you can check. I'd prefer to, if you check several of those, that just kind of lets us know where the interest is. And again, when the actual disaster strikes, it may change. So, but we have inbound and outbound donations. So that's going to be things like financial or monetary contributions, also water, food, clothing, diapers, pots and pans, everything you can imagine. And then I was also talking with Matt. Matt's from Eastside Church, and my wife and them know each other really well, and they were here for VBS also. But how many beds did you say you have? Cots? Like 30? Okay, so they have like 30 cots, and so maybe we can partner with them, and that's my hope in this whole process too, is to be able to partner with Nuwala, Eastside, some of these other churches around here, so we can be the command center, and the smaller congregations can help us, or what if we get hit and our congregation no longer stands, and we need to set up at Nuwala, or Hera, or Eastside. So, but we've got inbound and outbound donations, and the donation side of it can go on for weeks and months, where people are coming in to pick up stuff. So then we have food prep and packaging. We have food delivery. Again, whenever you're going out into these areas, you got to be careful because nails, debris, things like that. Anybody stepping on anything? Yes. Yes, yes. We have the damage recovery teams. I don't know what y'all call them. That was the best name I could come up with. But teams that actually go out into the field, and they're going to be helping people move debris, maybe even help them load trailers with their belongings. And Connie can talk more about that and the downside to trying to recover your belongings. To anything from tree removal, helping cut down limbs, and then dragging all that stuff to the curb so that they can come through. And that's things that people don't really think about, that it's your responsibility as a landowner to move that stuff after a fire, after a flood, after a tornado. It's your responsibility to secure your home, to prevent it from getting further damage. So tarps, boards, boarding up your doors and windows and things like that. So those are areas that we can help people out in. I had a client and a friend of mine that her kids were in one of the elementaries that got hit in 2011, and their son got quite a bit of damage to his leg and didn't walk very well for quite a while, but she didn't realize that she had to board up her house and tarp up her house. And so the insurance didn't want to pay for some of the later damage that came. So housing, if anybody's willing to step up and help us with people that are displaced and maybe housing them temporarily, or making phone calls and trying to find housing for them and housing opportunities that are out there. From a counseling standpoint, we need to be looking at grief counseling, what these people go through. Their homes have been destroyed, their kids have been mangled up, they have PTSD, and kids don't want to go back to school after that. So grief counseling, spiritual counseling, I think Marty's pretty good at that. But if anybody is a actual counselor by trade, I'd like to know that. And then anybody that has property and casualty experience with claims, if anybody is a property and casualty agent, I would love to know that. So, but we'll need to be able to provide counseling services, and like I said, we'll get training from some of these other resources and how to do that. And then we can have speakers come in to speak to, invite victims into the church and on a Monday evening or something, and have a class for them on how to file claims. Administrative side of it, we have lots of logs and waivers and all different kinds of things that we'll need signed and processed. And like I said, we got a lot of tracking to do, and I can't even imagine what Joe has gone through over the last 10 years or so. I don't know how long you've been the director of the program up there, but I can't imagine what your phone even looks like after a disaster like that. And yeah, so I need help. I cannot do this alone. And you want to go ahead and pass out the waivers? We'll go ahead and get those started around, and there should be pins on the back of your pews that you can fill out. And if you have questions, just get with me later. We also are going to have a waiver, and it's a 2-page waiver. Sorry, I just hit the microphone. It's a 2-page waiver for our volunteers to fill out. And so I got this from other organizations, kind of copied everything that they had done. There was one from FEMA that was like not even a quarter of the size, and I like this one. This was from a university. I can't even remember which university uses it, but I stole theirs because it was online. It's free. And I modified it a little bit. So if anybody in here is an attorney, I'd like to know that, because we can certainly use some help in trying to stay out of trouble. But this is to protect, keep doing that. This is to protect our volunteers and to protect our congregation, our elders, and everybody. Then we have another waiver here that is for us to fill out with the victims. So when we do something at their house, our crews will have this liability waiver that, again, will protect our church and all the volunteers. And it will capture all the information, and it gives us permission to do the work on their property, but it gives their address and the date of the request and what are they requesting us to do. So it seems very tedious, but again, in this world of litigation, we need to make sure and protect ourselves. We're going to be trying to order some T-shirts. Those T-shirts are going to serve several purposes. One is to identify us in the community, identify us to the victims, identify us to the police and National Guard that are out there trying to protect the victims. But it's also going to allow us an opportunity to show that we are the Church of Christ, and we're here in the community to help. And lastly, it's going to help protect us a little bit, because if, Joe and I were talking that those shirts, if somebody comes to us and they say, well, your crews did this, and what color shirts did they have on? Well, they had on yellow shirts. Well, sorry, that's not us. If we can help you in any way, that's great, but that wasn't us, because we have blue shirts. So we're going to have T-shirts for all of our volunteers, and this is kind of a hard part because, again, we're operating off of a minimal budget, and the thing that I would like to ask everybody to do is, if you want to be involved, to cover the cost of the T-shirts so that we can spend the money on other things. Because looking at just a run of 250 shirts, that's 50 for each size, that'd run us probably about $1,200, which sounds outrageous, but that's actually very cheap, because the small, mediums, larges, and XLs will be $5. That's for the printed shirt. And I think Mike is one that actually got me in contact. Mike Coghill got me in contact with somebody out of Edmond, and they're willing to do it for $5. And after talking with several people, everybody's like, if you can get them for $5, do it, because that's super cheap. The 2XL is the only one that's going to be a little bit more expensive, and that's $7. So if you can and are willing to donate for that cause and getting those T-shirts, we ask that you do that. Again, appropriate attire is something that is a must, and it's sad that we have to talk about this, but if you are volunteering, and again, a lot of these things that are going to happen could be dead summer, super hot, make sure you wear appropriate clothing. Appropriate clothing in the form of safety. So if you're going out in the field, don't wear flip-flops. You can't be effective in flip-flops. But also dress as a Christian. And then lastly, we're going to have the T-shirts. So, but if you're bringing anybody, and we would love for you to bring people. We'd love for you to bring people from other denominations. We'd love for you to bring people from the community, your friends, family, and get them involved, because again, we just might get a new member from this process, but make sure that they're in appropriate clothing, because they're representing us. If they're wearing that T-shirt, they're representing us, and we don't want them out there wearing something that's highly inappropriate. So, you had a question?
Yeah, when we had tornado get the hit corners across the T-shirt
Yeah.
at the time, and then one of the things that I noticed, we had a lot of students
Yeah.
Very well organized, different groups of Baptists that I had dealt with that time. But one of the things that I noticed more than probably anything was people have a tendency to not take care of themselves. They're out there working,
Yeah.
working, and you've got to keep hydrated. Exactly what you're saying, you've got to wear the appropriate clothing. You've got to remember you're there to help, but you don't need to forget yourself.
Right. And Joe probably could speak to that personally about losing yourself in this whole process. And, you know, I've got 2 businesses to run. I can't lose myself. I can't lose my family in this whole process, much less, you know, somebody getting sick from heat exhaustion, heat stroke, or something like that. So it's very important that we take care of ourselves. And again, that's part of what we're going to be doing is making sure that when our crews go out, they've got water, they've got adequate supplies when they leave here. So, children, again, this is another kind of a touchy subject. And I will tell you, my daughter has been involved in volunteer stuff since she was tiny. At the age of 7, I was able to, because I've been involved in a ton of either not-for-profits, children's organizations. I've been involved in all kinds of stuff, hunting organizations, and I was able to set her at a table unsupervised with some other guy that I knew, but put her at a table at 7 years old and know that I can walk away and do my job as the director of the organization or the, you know, just a volunteer in the organization. I could walk away and know that my daughter would follow direction, unsupervised, and get the job done right. And that's, you know, to have a child at the age of 7 that can do that, you know, that's difficult. So my point to this is we can't be a daycare up here, and I'm not trying to be rude or anything like that, but when you're looking at people coming in here to get donations, we don't know who's walking through that door. And sometimes people show up and they show up and they show up. We don't know anything about them. And so if you got kids running around, there's no way to protect them. And if the kids are running around and you're having to supervise them, you're not effective in your task. So you've got to use your own judgment as a parent. At what point can my child be involved? Again, there'll be, you know, if you're going out into the field and you want to take your 7-year-old, are they able to go into an area that is potentially dangerous and avoid getting hurt? So think about that. I don't want to prolong that part, but it is something we have to consider, that we can't be a daycare up here. So, again, this is strictly a volunteer process. Your family, your commitments are going to take precedence over everything. But I am looking for several people, 3 or 4 people that can help me lead this charge and this ministry and make sure that when I can't be here, or to make sure that the crews are being taken care of, to make sure all the paperwork's being done. I need 3 or 4 people that are willing to step up to the plate and take on that charge as a leader in the different areas. So if that's you, I actually have a sign-up sheet for that. So come see me afterwards. I've got that sign-up sheet right up here. And then lastly, I've got a sign-up sheet for special skills. If you have any special skill, and I'm not going to be able to mention them all because I can't think of them all, but things like law enforcement, if you have property and casualty insurance, if you are first responder or have been an EMT or a nurse or a doctor, sorry, I just got told I moved away from the mic. So, but if you're a first responder, if you have medical experience, not that we're going to be providing medical to any victims, but it'd be nice to have somebody that's a dual position that can go into the field with our work crews, have medical knowledge, and be able to provide some care if one of us gets hurt. Wrap up a bandage, get the paramedics there, somebody that can make decisions and provide that medical assistance to our people. And you never know. It could be a victim that's working on their house, moving something, and they fall down of heat exhaustion. And so having somebody in the field that can make calls like that. But you'll see on the waiver, if anybody wants to look at that, you're more than welcome to look at it. But we'll do the waivers at the time of the disaster because we want to make sure that we're current at that point. But you'll see there's a part on there that gives us permission to act as your power of attorney and be able to make decisions, medical decisions in your place. Obviously, if you're capable of doing that, there's no need for that. But if you're not capable of making those decisions, we'll have the power of attorney to make those calls and get paramedics there and get you transported out of there until somebody else comes along. So if you're a heavy equipment operator or have access to heavy equipment, I'd like to know that. I know y'all go and rent some heavy equipment, and that helps you, one, get into areas, two, helps you be more effective. And so that might be something that we're looking at a time of disaster. Do we need to go rent a Bobcat or something like that? But I know some of y'all are self-employed. Some of you have access to that. So if you have those special skills and can provide that, and again, you may be busy because, like, my wife works at the hospital. She's probably going to be at the hospital working, not here, if it strikes anywhere close. So, because they all have to go in. But have I forgotten anything so far? Okay. The T-shirts, if y'all want to pass that around. So we've got a sign-up sheet for T-shirts, and that way if you we can collect the money after we have the T-shirts ordered and delivered and everything. We can collect the money at that time, just like we do for VBS and different things. So just a sign up if you want a shirt, mark down what size, how many you need, and don't, right now all there is adult sizes. We're not ordering any children's sizes, but at some point we might want to do that just for advertising. And then, again, if you have access to equipment, things like, and again, this isn't all inclusive, but bobcats, trailers, grills, chainsaws, anything, ice chests, anything. I have a sign-up sheet here, especially if you have access to a lot of equipment and stuff like that. I have a sign-up sheet here so I can kind of get an idea of what resources we do have available to us right now. So, does anybody have any questions? I know you had one.
Since we're going to be quickly toward the end of summer and going toward colder weather,
Right.
What about the availability of being able to order a jacket also?
Hadn't really thought about that. That might be something down the road that we look, but yeah, because we have ice storms, and that's, again, areas where we might have to do some cleanup for people. And so that might be something. I don't know, do y'all do anything in the cold weather climates? Or yeah. Okay.
They're usually not as big, so it's not, and the crews aren't as big.
Okay.
Like it will be during tornado season and things like that.
Okay. Did y'all hear that? He said through their ministry.
Wear a shirt, they're typically under their stuff.
Okay. Yeah, they still require them to wear their shirts, but because those events are typically much smaller than a tornado that wipes out an entire community, that they just go ahead and wear their personal jackets and stuff over those shirts. But because, again, those crews are smaller.
Hats maybe.
Okay. Yeah, that might be something to think about too, would be, hats, one, just to keep you cool. And I know I sweat a ton from my head, so when I put on a hat and it's hot outside, the hat goes flying because I cook in a hat, but it does help with sun. So, any other questions before I turn it over to Connie? Yes.
incoming donations and outgoing donations.
Right.
Where are you going to store these incoming donations?
Okay, incoming donations is going to be in the church. So yeah. Yeah, and so, yeah, some of the classrooms will, like they did, they turn a classroom into, okay, this is for, say, men. This classroom is for children. This classroom is for pots and pans. And then they allow those victims to come in, and so it's going to be a learning process through this whole thing. So, but you'll see the effects that it has on congregations and stuff like that. And that's why I say it forever changes our congregation and what we do. And so that's a very good question.
So are you only going to accept donations for this, when the disaster happens, then ask for donations to come in? Or, I think another thing, where are we going to store it all?
Yeah, we don't have a storage facility. We don't, I think we got a little shed out back. and I was told that maybe if we cleaned it up, we might be able to fit some things in there.
And I'll address that too.
Okay.
I've kind of made some notes of some of that stuff that you talked about.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Well, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Connie, my sister.
And I brought my bag glasses, so I was like, why did I bring my bag glasses today? So I'm Connie Blue, and so I'm just going to try to give you a little bit of perspective from a victim standpoint, and also because I did, as Tom said, go to Central. Our family, well, since I've been married, I grew up in Moore, moved away, came back, got married, and all of that. And during the time frame since I got married, up till now, we've been hit 5 times with tornadoes in Moore. We just kind of keep picking the wrong spot to live. The first couple of times, we really didn't reach out for any help because it was damage to our house, and just through some back labor and help with insurance, we were able to get ourselves right back on track. And it was just things like, ripping off patio cover, fences, trees, roof damage, things like that, some broken glass. So, to us, that was pretty minor, not a big deal. I think that was preparing us for the big May 3rd tornado. And, and I have to say this little quote because it makes me think about what we're talking about. You've heard that quote from Mr. Rogers, and I won't get it just right, that in any disaster, look for the helpers. And that's really what you do, especially as a victim. You're just looking for help. And so on May 3rd, 1999, I had a new baby, and then I had a 3-year-old. So we had just gotten home from work, and we were watching the news, and we were seeing that it was coming towards us. Oh, I should back up and say that the first house that we got hit a couple times in, we sold that house, and we got an apartment across from Westmore High School, and we were right at the very front of the apartment complex facing Westmore. And we were living there while we were building our new dream house, which was just there off of 134th and Penn in Country Place. And so we came home from work, and we were coming into our apartment. We had been watching the news, and we knew that we were going to get hit. And so we were putting all of our things into the bathtub, as you do when you don't have a storm shelter and you're living in an apartment. And as this thing grew and got uglier on the news, and the fear starts rising in us, and we're looking at our 2 little children thinking, this little cracker box is not going to hold. We want it out of there. So we were about to panic. And so we did what they tell you not to do. We got in the car and we drove. And so that tornado was pretty well on us at that point. It was headed straight for us. We knew we were going to take a direct hit. We were hoping to get on the edge of it, but it was so wide, we knew we couldn't get very far without possibly getting hit. So we jumped in one vehicle. We had 2 babies, a diaper bag, and one of our 2 vehicles, because we didn't want to split up in that situation, you can imagine. So we made it from Western to Penn to where his parents lived, and we got in their closet just in time, and it barely missed their neighborhood. We could actually hear it go by, and we all thought we were still going to die, even having gone there. So we were very traumatized. You know, trying to be calm in front of the kids when you just don't know if you're going to make it through the night, actually. My 3-year-old, as Tom talked about, we talked about PTSD, she still suffers from it. My youngest at the time, Justin, he really wasn't as affected, but she certainly still is and suffers from pretty severe anxiety. And especially it didn't help that we've been through several tornadoes since then. So just to talk about like those first hours after you come out of the tornado, and you know, the first thing we did literally was try to bolt back to the neighborhood, because that is what you have to do, because they will cordon it off. We had the National Guard come in, and it didn't matter who you weren't getting in at first. Then they sort of set up these processes with IDs and proving that you live there and things like that. But it gets crazy. You've got helicopters, sirens of every type going off, and for your children in that situation, it's extremely traumatic to constantly, for hours and hours and hours, hear those sirens and things, and the helicopters going over, the news helicopters, the National Guard, and things like that going on. So, you know, your stress level is through the roof. And, you know, with the babies, the first things that, you know, and just with any family, the first things you think of is, well, okay, we realize that where we live is gone. We have nowhere to live now. And so where are we going to sleep tonight? So those are the first things, you know. Lucky for us, we had family. Not everybody is going to have family to go to. There are people here who are here because they're in the military, or they just moved here, and not everybody has a family member to go stay with. We kind of assume that people do, but that's not always the case. And so we were lucky. We had a house to stay in, and so we went to my husband's sister's house, and we stayed there, but we had a diaper bag. And so, you know, beyond shelter, the next thing as a young parent that you're thinking of is, those diapers are not going to last very long. And you start to panic about diapers. It's amazing how important diapers become. And so, you know, we're like, we're worried about the house. We got to go get diapers. And so you start, you know, your stress level is not going to come down for a while, because you are constantly thinking in 10 different directions. You know, my husband's trying to worry about finding a place for us to live. All the apartments were starting to get taken up. He was smart enough on the first full day, the next day, to start calling around and found an apartment for us to move into soon, that we could get in there. A lot of people didn't do that fast enough. And so they were ending up in hotels, or having to move, you know, to find an apartment way far away, because that was the closest place they could find shelter. So you've got shelter, you've got food, we needed diapers, we needed formula, and we had the clothes on our backs. So then all of a sudden you get real sick of what you're wearing. You know, you need some changes of clothes pretty quick. And I was lucky and blessed that the place I worked at the time, which was Foley's, allowed us to go in and get changes of clothes, and they wrote them off. That was huge, because we didn't know what else we were going to do for clothes. Had they not done that, I'm really not sure what we would have done. Maybe, you know, tried to get money and go to Goodwill, because we really didn't have a budget. We were a new, poor little babies at the home family. We didn't have that extra money in the bank to go, well, let's just go shopping. So we were kind of pretty stressed about all of those things. We did get help from a couple of churches at the time. The congregation that we were going to at that time was not Central, it was another church. They didn't do any kind of disaster work. So there was really no help for us there in our own church, surprisingly. And so that was something that kind of sticks in the back of your head, I will tell you. But we found help with diapers, wipes, and eventually a mattress that we needed help with from another church in our community. And then again, like I said, we got some clothes from Foley's, and eventually our insurance was able to kick in and start helping us with those immediate needs. But it took days and weeks for us to even feel like we were functioning in a normal way. And, you know, we had family. You know, I did have family. I had Tom, and he was a big help to us and all of that. We had to get somebody was, you know, blessing us enough that they actually said, hey, I've got a flatbed trailer. I can't tell you how important that flatbed trailer was to us to get there and fill up those plastic tubs. We got some people to donate a few flat plastic tubs, and we were able to go buy a couple. We didn't have very many, but we were throwing things in there. You think during a disaster that anything that you go back and find is good to keep. And so you're like, yay, look what I found. And one of the things that we were able to find was some of our kids' toys. We quickly realized that they could not have those toys. They were covered in glass, insulation, that fiberglass stuff. You start even handling it and you're itching. You're getting this rash and these hives. The stuff that you think you can take with you and save, you find out pretty much, unless it's a solid surface that can be scrubbed and cleaned, if it's porous, a lot of times you can't save it. You want to, but you've just got to let it go. And so all of our clothes that we were able to round up, blankets, all of the kids' toys, it wasn't safe to take. When we went back and were able to get in, starting that next day, to try to gather those things up, it was a scene that some of you have seen before, and if you haven't, it's shocking when you first go there. Tom talked about injuries when you're going out and working. That is highly possible that you'll have a minor injury. And hopefully it's just minor, but I'm just saying it's very possible. I had on tennis shoes thinking that those would be good enough to go out that day. But as I pulled my foot off of the nail that went, well, it felt like it was about that. No, it was about that. It was a pretty good sized nail. It went all the way through my foot. So I had to hobble over to a fire truck and get a tetanus shot and bandage that up and keep working. And I was not happy. Let me tell you, I was one crying camper. But we had to rip the doors off the hinges and walk on the doors on the debris because we couldn't walk through the debris. It was too deep to get into our stuff. We found in our living room what was left of our living room. The apartment above us, by the way, was completely scraped off. And we were very afraid for those people because they were still there when we left, but they saw us leave and they took off right after us, thank goodness, or they wouldn't be alive. 4 people died in our apartment complex. And we were afraid that they were gone as well, but it turned out that they took off right after we did. They had the same train of thought and ran. It was a good thing because there was nothing left. Ours was completely devastated. Kitchen knives sticking out of your walls. It looked like someone had taken a machine gun and just shot the place up, and that was just from little rocks. But yeah, we had kitchen knives just sticking out of our walls. We had 2x4s just sticking out. Our truck was on the other side of the building where a tree used to sit, and that's where the truck was, just twisted up into a ball. And, so seeing those things and realizing that had we stayed, we probably would not have made it just from the flying debris alone. Even though the bottom part of the apartment, most of it was still there, we probably wouldn't have lived. Our doors, instead of being straight, there was so much suction in the doors that they were bent like this. And so whatever we could find that was flatter, we used that to walk on. And we pulled things out. Like I said, we were frantic to find anything that we could, thinking we could save it. And unfortunately, you can't. So you really need initial help for those immediate needs. And then as the weeks go and everybody thinks you're okay, you're still finding out you're really not okay. Those things you thought you could save, they're gone too. And so it's hard. And then, of course, there's the emotional part of it. And insurance is great. Thank goodness for insurance. And I highly recommend it. And especially even renter's insurance. If somebody's living in an apartment, get the renter's insurance. But one of the things that insurance can't help you with is that emotional support you need. And that goes on for a long, long time. I can talk about all of this now without shaking, but it took a long time to do that. And we were hit a couple of more times after that in that house that we were building. It was actually, the tornado scraped it down to the concrete. There was nothing left of it. And so we had to start over building that house as well, because it was just right there in the path as well. So we lost the house we were building and the apartment we were living in. We rebuilt that house and it got hit 2 more times. But it was minor damage. It was part of the roof taken off, the fencing and different types of minor damage like that. It was very helpful at those times when we were actually out because we were right on the very edge of that tornado, that last big one that went through. And so a lot of our friends were hit. Our kids were in the high school when it happened. Again, the PTSD, they had to walk through the debris with houses burning, power lines down, sirens, the helicopters, the whole bit. And they had to walk from the high school to our house, which is a long way, because we couldn't get to them. Yeah. And so by the time they got home, my older two, my daughter, she was just hysterical. So, there's a lot of long-term stuff that you can help people with, and just be kind and be understanding and hold their hand and understand when they're having difficulty. She couldn't sit with the youth group in the church, and a lot of people didn't understand why she couldn't do that. Her anxiety was through the roof. She would just have trouble breathing, and she still struggles with that. Bless her heart, she's 23 and just married a youth minister, and they live down in Dripping Springs now, south of Austin, but she still struggles with it every day. And it's from going through all of these disasters that she's been in. So it helps to just have Christians, brothers and sisters who can help you through those things. Okay, so I'm going to talk really fast and then I'll be done about Central Church of Christ. So I guess it was the May 9th. There's so many dates now in my head, I can't keep them all straight, but it was one of the last big ones that wiped out part of Moore. And again, we were on the edge of that, so we just had some damage. But Central really stepped up to the plate, helping with that. It became, when Tom talks about Command Central, that sounds very military, and both of us are military background, but it truly is Command Central. You have to run it like that kind of an operation. It takes a lot of organization, a lot of volunteers, and some people are just volunteering for an hour here, an hour there, and then other people are there for 10 hours a day. It's whatever you can do, and every single minute that you're helping is important. Okay, and it's valuable. So don't think, well, I'm not doing as much because this person, they're there day in and day out, and I feel so bad, I can only help on the weekends. If that's what you can do, wonderful. Do that. You can only help for a couple hours in the evenings. Do that. That's great. Every single bit of help is important. We did bring in the Red Cross early on in that situation with our volunteer group, and we had them set up tables at the front. And we all had to get tetanus shots. It had been a while since I'd had my last, tetanus shot situation. So, everybody that was going to work, no matter what kind of work it was, had to get a tetanus shot. And so there's good reason for that. And then they were also offering it to people in the community that needed to come up and get tetanus shots so that they could go out and work. The food trucks Tom spoke about, 3 meals a day for months on end. And they fed victims, they fed their friends and family that were helping them, the volunteers, first responders. They were all coming to the parking lot to get a meal. Or we were taking it out, we would use the church buses, and we would take out loads of this stuff. And like Tom was talking about, individuals take it out and deliver those meals all the time to the community, and ice chests full of cold water. And that was so appreciated by these people while they're out there looking for their stuff. They don't have to stop and get in a car and drive through this mess and go eat and come back. They lose too much time that way. So they want to be able to keep working. So if you can bring that to them, it's very appreciated. The food, clothing, household items and things like that we stored at the church, we had tons and tons and tons of people coming in for those things. So I think that's really kind of all I'm going to go over with as far as Central. But Tom knows a lot about that, and you can ask him about certain things, how it went there. But it was a wonderful experience to be part of that, to be able to give back, especially after having been on the receiving end or the needing end. So I think that's it.
Thank you. Yeah, and she, again, her house after being hit like that. And one of the things that she kind of touched on just a second ago was the ability to get in and out. It's extremely difficult as a volunteer to get in and out, but it's also extremely difficult because, some of these people don't have their IDs to be able to even get into their own neighborhood, to their own house. And then the checkpoints and the lines getting in are so long that they can't leave. Because if they leave, it's going to be hours before they get back in, half a day before they get back in. So anyways, Joe, would you like to come on up?
Good evening, guys. How are you? That was bad. How are you guys? Good. Enthusiasm, that's what we need. This is an hour and a half speech, and I'm going to condense it to 59 minutes. He told me that I had at least an hour to talk. Where to begin? First of all, these are my 3 daughters. I have 4, but one is doing other things tonight, and they are survivors of a F5 tornado. At the time, it was the 3rd fastest tornado in the history of tornadoes. The storm shelter that they were in was lifted 3 inches up out of the ground, and so it was a big deal. And so I've been on both sides of tragedy. I want to start tonight with a little game. Okay, we're gonna have a little fun here, so it can't all be gloom and doom. I'm going to read this to you, and I want you to tell me the poet who wrote this real quick. All right. So many times I've questioned certain circumstances and the things. Let me read again. And the things I could not understand. Many times in trials, my weakness blurs my vision, and that's when my frustration gets so out of hand. It's then I am reminded I've never been forsaken. I've never had to stand one test alone. As I look at all the victories, the Spirit rises up in me, and it's through the fire my weakness is made strong. He never promised that the cross would not get heavy and the hill would not be hard to climb. He never offered a victory without fighting. He said help would always come in time. Who wrote that? You know. You don't know? It's Randy Travis. How do you not know Randy Travis? I mean, come on. It's one of my favorite Randy Travis songs, and I know he's kind of, his life is definitely different than it used to be, but I like that song because in disaster relief, my goal from the time that I took over in 2013 at Memorial Road has been to spread the gospel of Christ. And so I can greatly appreciate Tom's sister and what she's gone through. That's a powerful statement. My family has also gone through that. But later, after we took the storage container, that we took all of that stuff that she mentioned that we thought we saved, and I put it all in a storage, And then every week I'd go back and look at it, and I kept kind of throwing the stuff away that wasn't any good. And by the time I was done, there wasn't anything left. So I realized that it's just stuff. And though that it was hard to lose, it's just stuff. And I had my family. And so I say that because I think one of the goals of what you're trying to do is to bring people to Christ. It's not just replacing and replenishing their furniture. And so many other organizations try to do that. And I would suggest to you that in the back of your mind, what you keep in the back of your mind is that you're fulfilling these people's needs who've lost literally everything. They are humbled, they are broken, they are lonely, and they are seeking God, believe it or not, because they've never been through it. And once they've gone through it, they know that there's something else out there. And many of them don't know what it is. So all these efforts that you're about to go through, they are difficult. They are rewarding for not just the victims, but for you and your congregation, because through the power of giving, you will see Christ involved in that. But the reason I'm telling you that is because if your mission is to spread the gospel, you will service those people differently than many other groups do, because that's how Jesus did it. So when you go into those areas and all the different things that you've talked about already, when you do it like Christ does it, it feels different to them. And they will be sitting in these pews with you someday because of that. In 2011, I was doing a basketball camp in McAlester, Oklahoma. I am a basketball coach, and I am also the disaster relief minister. So I was doing a camp, and I was 3 hours away from home when my family was hit by that tornado. I drove 120 miles an hour back from McAlester. I saw 3 vehicles, and I drove through 2 tornadoes to get to them. When I got there, there were already 30 members of my church there working with my family. It's powerful to see people like you who love people serving. It was a bigger testimony to me than any other thing, was to drive down that driveway and see family that I love, which I mean my church family, serving my family. And so that is what I hope your congregation gets to. Because when you do that, the bonds that he was talking about, your church forming, that truly will form bonds within your congregation that are just, it's just like brothers and sisters. You would never want to be with anybody else. So there was a tornado up north once, and I called a church and I said, hey, I want to come up and do a disaster relief meeting for your church. And the deacon or the elder, whoever I was talking to, he said, well, we really haven't had anybody in our church that was hurt in the tornado. And I said, well, you don't understand. I want you to be a community outreach. I want you guys to be able to help the community. He goes, well, we don't know if, we're ready to do that or not. And I said, well, I just want to come and talk to you. He said, well, let me talk to my elders and see. And so he hung up, and I said, I'm going to go talk to him one way or another. So I called him right back, and I said, listen, I want to come up and speak to your congregation. I'm bringing a check for $10,000. He said, well, sure, you can come, after I told him I was paying him $10,000. So he let me come up on a Wednesday night at 5 o'clock. I went up, sat down with the elders and the deacons and some of those, and after I got done speaking to them, they said, you need to speak to the congregation tonight. So I met with the congregation that night, and they turned the church service over to me. And I spoke to them just like I'm talking to you today. And the next day was a Thursday. 95% of their membership from that church was back at that church stuffing buckets, getting ready to deliver those buckets into the community. They had a meal that followed. They had people of the community that came in. And that church became a leader in that community. And it was not because of my efforts. It was because of God moving in that church. And it's not that they didn't want to. It's that they didn't know how. They were nervous. They were scared. Being a visionary like what you guys are trying to do will prepare you physically and mentally for when it does come. Because it's not if, it's when in Oklahoma. It's going to happen. And when it does, and you're ready, you guys can go into these communities and into your community or into your families or in the families that surround your church building, and you guys can have an impact that nobody else can have because of the way that you are servicing the needs of those people that have been impacted. Matthew 28:18 says this, "Then Jesus came to them and said, 'All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded.'" This is your opportunity to do that. When people are in the middle of disasters, it is a disaster, but it's also an opportunity. We send missionaries out all over the world, and we send them to really desolate areas. And those places that they send them, the people are so willing, ready, and available to receive Christ because they are broken and they need Christ. And through disasters, the same exact thing happens. I know. And so when you guys prepare for this and you go into those areas, the Holy Spirit will work through you and it will move those people to action. I can't tell you how. I've just seen it over and over and over and over. Recently, someone told me a story of where a guy was taking his family to church. He dropped his family off at church, and as he was driving to church, he saw a lady that needed help on the road. She had a flat tire. Dropped his family off, went back, helped her with the flat tire, and she was broken, and she was broke. So he gave her $40 and fixed her tire. Several years later, that same man was going through with his mother. She was needing hospice care. And so the hospice company sent somebody over to help. And the nurse that came to help got sick, so they sent a substitute. That substitute person was the lady that he gave the $40 to several years earlier. They recognized each other. And that lady fell in love with his mother and helped her through the hardest time of her life. That's a Holy Spirit story. I've got hundreds of those. I wish national media would publicize some of the same spiritual stories that we hear every day through our church and our congregation, because God's moving and it's obvious and it's factual and you can see it, but people don't talk about it, and we need to do a better job talking about it. And through disaster relief efforts, you guys can do that. You can be prayer warriors. You don't have to be out there lifting heavy equipment or stepping on nails. You can pray with people. When disasters hit and victims are at their lowest, doing little things for them are more important than doing big things. And one is just listening. Their stuff is already gone. Go sit with them and just talk. And when you do those type of activities with them, they will fall in love with you, and they will fall in love with the Spirit within you, and they will not want to know why you are the way you are. And you have to be prepared to tell them that. If you have not told your own personal life story about how you got involved with Christ, you need to learn. You need to practice that. Because through this disaster relief ministry, you'll be able to do it. And when you do that, you will change people's lives. I have so many things. I don't want to skip all of these things. Read Romans 8. For those who are led by the Spirit of God are the children of God. It's powerful to know that we are children of God. I'm not sure if God really cares if we live to be 98 or 15 years old. I've never read that in Scripture. I don't know how old God cares for us to be when it's our turn to go. But I do know this. Whatever those years are, He cares about what you do with them. Are you using those to glorify Him and spread the gospel message? This is our opportunity to do that. So opportunities to serve. However, there are many different ways to serve. I don't know if you've read Job. I love the book of Job, and I love what Job went through, because before I had a disaster and my family went through the disaster, and then after the disaster, when I read the book of Job, it felt different. Because when you see what Job went through when he lost everything, and you understand how he kept his faithfulness to Christ, it's a powerful thing. People are never more receptive, and I mentioned this several times, than when they're in disasters. So what can we do as a church when we see that people are in need of help? I have kind of an overview of what I would like to see the statewide body of believers, churches of Christ, when disasters hits, kind of how I would like to see some of them respond. You know what we're really known for more than anything else, though, is casseroles. Like we can cook the best casseroles, right? And so what a lot of times people do is you'll cook something, you'll go drop it off and say, hey, I know you guys need this, and we'll give them like food, and then we'll pat ourselves on the back, and they'll have a really good casserole. But then where does it go from there? You know, what else do we do? I remember not long after we had been in our tornado, I remember my wife saying, if another person tells me, hey, if you need anything, call me. If another person says that, I'm going to vomit. And after she said that, I started listening. It's what everybody says. Hey, I know you're really struggling right now. I know you've lost everything. If you need anything, call us. We'll help you. How many Oklahomans are going to call somebody? Zero. We do our own work. We work hard. We pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, and we get after it, right? So if you're a Christian, you want to help people, you know what you should do? You should help them. Don't ask them to mow their yard. Go mow their yard. Don't ask them to clean their clothes. Go clean their clothes. We have got to start developing that mindset. It's the little things that matter. And when you are proactive in the way that you approach victims, it is so powerful for them because they see the love of Christ through those actions. I'm going to read through this really fast, and you've already touched on it, but I just want you guys to have this process in your mind. You guys can attend to the physical needs of victims. You can do supply stations, blankets, or can organize debris removal, things that you've mentioned. The meals, delivering the meals. Counseling is so important, and I've said that over and over in all of the times that I speak. Counseling is so important. Prayer warriors, they're some of the most powerful people in this whole situation. Sit with the families and pray with them, and when they see the answers to those prayers coming back, they will be moved. Valuable recovery. I remember a guy that was on the front of a national magazine, drawing a blank, Time magazine. We met with the guy during the disaster. We was at his house, and my crew was out there, and they were walking around this house. It was an older gentleman 4 months earlier. He had just lost his wife, and then he lost two houses. His house and the house next to him was his. And so one of our crews was out there, and they were walking around. They were helping, sifting through things, and they found all of his wife's wedding rings. And he'd been married to her 50 or 60 years. And he lost them. And this was maybe a week or so later. That little act of kindness and the extra attention that they put into that made the biggest impact on that gentleman that I've ever seen. Just those rings. Addressing insurance needs. Insurance is literally the difference between people being on the street and being back into a house. And so some of those things that go along with insurance, I do insurance meetings at every church I go to. I do meetings that address insurance from the victim's perspective, not the insurance company's perspective. And those are very powerful, and we can talk about that. I have a whole list of things that I talk to about victims, about the recovery process, and I think that that's something that you guys could really be beneficial for you, is to be able to address the victims by you guys having some knowledge of what your sister just talked about. She just said so much that you guys, if you have never been in it, she is really good, and I don't even think she knows it. She could literally be traveling around speaking all the time. So there's some of those issues that would be really good for you to address. Partnering with other organizations. I met with the president of an organization. It was what's the name of it? It's like Catholic Charities, something or other. And I met with the president. He called me. And my elders were like, well, why are we meeting with the Catholic Church organization? And I went, well, they called me. I just wanted to see what they had to say. So I went in and met with them. And the guy that was their leader of that particular aspect of that organization was a member of the Church of Christ. I wouldn't have known that. And you know what he did for me? He put me in touch with victims. And you know what we did with the victims? We helped them because of us partnering with certain organizations. So don't rule out the opportunities to work with other people, because it will show that you, the Choctaw Church of Christ, is willing to step across boundaries to serve people, and it will make you more open and receptive for people to be here. I don't know how else to say that. It's very important that we reach out and share Christ with everybody. I think that that's a very important opportunity for us. Providing counseling for victims, we talked about that. Motivating churches to act and get involved. We have to just do something. Each church has so many members that are skilled at something, and he's addressed this. If he mentioned skills already, but if you guys have something that you're really, really good at, it's better for you to be involved in that aspect of ministry, because you can truly be a leader in that area. It doesn't matter if it is cooking or cutting down trees or whatever it is. And so I think that part of it, when he passed that, and then, so this has happened to me several times now, and I'm just going to say this now because I haven't even got to say it to my church. If you sign up to be a part of the disaster relief program, and there's a disaster, and he emails all of you, and you can't make it because your child has a third grade softball game, it's a disaster. And I'm saying that not really sarcastically, pretty seriously. And I say that because I have 3,000 members in our congregation-ish. And there's been times that I'll email people and I will have 100 people go with me to Houston. Then there's times I'll email people and I'll have 3. And sometimes when we only have 3, it's when I need 100. And so I'm saying that nobody's schedule is a disaster. And so when you guys sign up for it, really think of that to the best of your ability as a commitment to some degree. And I know that you can't be there all the time. I can't either, just as he mentioned. But I say that because I would suggest that when you sign up and put your name on there, whatever you write your name next to, be serious about that thing. Because that thing, you could truly end up being a leader in that area, which could really help a lot of people. Okay? And last 2 things. The bucket program. So here's what the bucket program is, and I use this example because I think that it carries weight with it in a lot of different areas. So here's our bucket program. Every time there's a disaster somewhere, I'll find a local congregation. I'll go to that church, and we'll get about 100 buckets. And we take the buckets, we stuff them full of diapers, wipes, food, formula, gloves, yada, 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 whatever it is. And then at the top of the bucket, we put a sticker on there, and let's say that it's local, and we'll put Choctaw Church of Christ on it. And it'll say that we're having a dinner, it'll have your address, and it tells them when they can come back for a free dinner, and then we give away prizes, gifts, whatever, gift cards, something. And then we talk about insurance. So what happens is that the church takes the buckets, they go into the community, and they have to walk through that disaster area and physically hand out those buckets and shake hands. What does that do for this congregation when you do that? Somebody tell me. Yeah, it gets you into the community. And it also gets you activated. And then you have a vested interest in it. And most congregations, when I do that, they think that it's for the community, but it's not. It's for the church. But then the community talks about it. Next thing you know, you'll have 100 people who have never been in this church sitting in those pews listening to him talk. That is powerful. And then from that point, it's your job to keep them coming back to this church for more diapers, more wipes, for food, for counseling, for other things. That's the premise of the bucket program, because then you can start getting people to be here on a regular basis, and you can start mentoring and sharing the gospel with them, however you do that. Okay? James chapter 2. I don't know if you know James chapter 2, but it's powerful because faith without action is dead. Faith without action is dead. God wants us to be active. He wants us to share the gospel message. And just like Randy Travis said, carrying the cross is not easy. It is hard. Okay, last thing. I went to a tornado in Shawnee, America. And I was by myself. I heard it on the news, heard it hit, so I jumped in the truck, took off. First family I come to. The national media is already there. So I get there, there's trucks lined, they have their cameras out. I kind of go in the back way and I meet with the family and I say, hey, I'm just here to help. They didn't know me for nothing. I just start carrying stuff, I start helping them. Eventually, I meet the guy. I talk to him a little bit, and I tell him about the insurance and stuff. He said, my insurance guy's on the way. Can you stay here and be with me when I talk to him? I said, sure. So I helped him with his insurance stuff and met with his insurance agent and that kind of stuff. As I'm standing there, people are trying to come and help, and all the national media has the road blocked where people can't even come in and help because they're out there with their cameras. And here's what they're doing. They're saying, did anybody die? Who was injured? What happened to their pets? Why are they out there? What's the media trying to do? Yeah, they want a story, right? They didn't really care about all the other stuff. I'm on the inside of the house. The house is gone, but there's one wall standing. And the wall that was standing was the living room wall. And on the wall was written in big letters, as for me and my house, what? Yeah, I'm going to cry every time I tell this story, I cry. As for me and my family, we serve the Lord, right? Well, they missed the whole story. They missed it. They should have been on the house, on the inside, where the family was. And that's what I'm asking you to do. So I walk through the house and I walk outside, and there's a tree standing this tall, and it's wrapped in white paper, top to bottom. I don't even know why I'm crying. This isn't even sad. What am I doing? It's scriptures. From the top to the bottom of the tree, a Bible had hit it. It was wrapped in scriptures, top to bottom. It's so funny to walk by that. But if the media would have done a story on that, it would have gone viral. If people would have stood on the inside of that house and read those scriptures and seen the tree, it would have gone viral. Because that's what Christ does for people. And so I appreciate you guys and your efforts. This is not going to be easy for you. It's going to be hard. And when I say, and he calls you and he emails you and he says, come up, we got a disaster thing, just show up. Because you're not going to want to, and it's not going to be easy. But I promise you, when you get through on the other side of the disaster, the people that you help will be blessed, but not nearly as much as you will be blessed for the things that you do when you serve. I promise you that to be true. So let's pray real quick, and then we'll take questions. If you need to leave, please leave, because we've kept you way too long. So let's just pray real quick. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity, for this congregation, Lord, to have the heart in a servant-minded way, Lord, to reach out to those people who are victims, and that, Lord, we ask that you allow them to, in the back of their minds and in their hearts, know that through these disaster opportunities, it's an opportunity to share the gospel of Christ. That's what we are called to do. And Lord, in whatever fashion this church decides to do it, we ask that you allow them to bring more people into your fold so that someday they will be in heaven with you. Lord, we ask that you'll just protect this group as they take this responsibility on, that you'll guide them, that your Holy Spirit will be with them, and that they will be able to function, Lord, as a part of your hand that will allow them to service people, Lord, not just in this congregation, but in the communities that surround them. Thank you so much for the example that you set with Christ and how hard that was on you and how hard it was on Christ. We know that, Lord, sometimes it takes sacrifice to do these things. And we pray this in his name. Amen. I'll stick up around if you guys need questions.
Thank y'all for being here tonight. Honestly, I don't know whether I should cry right now or shoot 3-point baskets, and I never played basketball in my life. So, but anyways, I really appreciate y'all being here tonight. It ran way longer than I had anticipated, but I think there was a lot of information, and I know there was a lot of people that had wanted to be here, that had expressed an interest in being here, but couldn't for various reasons. So please relay on to them the things that you've heard. And then lastly, there were 2 different forms that I sent around. I think it was on 3 clipboards. One was for resources, the other one was for special skills. So make sure that if you are one of those people that have either resources or skills, to let us know. So make sure and grab that sign-up sheet. But again, we'll stay around as long as y'all want for questions and answers. So anybody have anything?
It's David Westgate. I work with David quite a bit.
They had chainsaw sharpeners. Oh my gosh. When you start cutting that
It's Lane McPhail.
And they've got
Yeah.
the old style chainsaw truck. That are the best that were ever built. They're just old. And I'm odd, I bought 3 of those. So I've got, and I will donate, if someone knows how to work one,
Okay.
we'll donate 3 of those.
Okay. Any other questions or? All right, well, I think that adjourns our meeting. Thank y'all.